So I'm changing pace a little bit today, and I'm introducing some new technique topics that will have to do not with playing percussion, but writing for percussion. The first topic I'll be breaking down is one that I get asked about a lot, which is instrumentation. The topic of instrumentation can really mean a whole bunch of different things, but for me, I break it down into two different categories. One, the actual instruments you're writing for, and two, how you'll set those instruments up. Let's start by talking about the actual instruments you'll be writing for. When you're writing a new piece for percussion, there are a few things that you should consider when thinking of the instrumentation. One, who is going to be playing your piece? Two, where is the piece going to be played? And three, how accessible are the instruments you're asking for? All three of these things will play into the type of piece you write and the kind of instruments you'll want to use. If, for example, the piece you want to write uses 3 marimbas, 2 vibraphones, a set of timpani, chimes, and a large amount of auxiliary percussion items, this is a great piece for the university ensemble and a large concert hall. However, that amount of instrumentation makes it a lot more difficult for a touring percussion group. On the other hand, there are a bunch of pieces out there that use minimal instrumentation and even the sharing of instruments between multiple players to make these pieces accessible to touring groups and smaller concert venues. There's nothing wrong with writing either style of piece, but as the composer, just be aware of what you're doing and keep in mind those 3 basic things: who's playing it, where it's being played, and how accessible the instruments. There are a lot more details that I can go into on this topic, and I will be in future videos. If there's anything specific you would like to ask, please comment below, and I'll be sure to include it in the next video on this topic. The next subcategory I wanted to introduce today was the idea of how you're going to set up the instruments once you've chosen what you want to write for. The biggest tip I have for this, and this goes for composers who aren't percussionists, as well as percussionists who are writing for their own instrument. Put yourself in the performer's shoes when you're writing. Think about the sounds you're using and how they'll be laid out within the setup. I figured the best way to do this is to show you an example of how I personally do this in my writing. I recently just finished a new trio, and so I'm sharing with you the first page of my original sketches. At the top of the page here, you can see my musical ideas to begin the piece, just like any other sketch for any piece. But because it's a percussion piece, at the bottom, I started drawing out the layout of instruments. As I add sounds, I add it to this drawing. Now, I'm no artist, and you don't have to be, but it just needs to be good enough that you can figure out if the instruments you're asking for are accessible by the players. With this drawing, I try and get as detailed as possible. I have both a layout of the entire piece of each player, and then next to it, I have a sort of zoomed in drawing of each trap table that I can keep track of all the small items I'm asking the players to use. This drawing remains helpful to me as I'm writing the piece because I can envision the setup and think about stickings for different patterns. Will that sticking make sense? Will it even be possible? Can they play these instruments at the same time, or are they too far apart? Can I reorganize the trap table to make those sounds happen at the same time? All of these questions are important topics to keep in mind as you're writing for a percussion group. And if you know for a fact that what you're writing is possible because you've done this extra work, I promise you the performers will notice. Ask any percussionist, and we've all had to perform pieces where this was not thought about, where you might have to perform marimba, toms, woodblocks, a crash, and a tam-tam, all within 2 or 3 measures. And things like mallet changes and instrument location aren't thought about. When things like that aren't thought about within a piece, it makes it a lot harder to put it together and rehearse it for a performance. As the composer, when you put in that extra step, then it makes it a lot easier for the performer to rehearse it, therefore guaranteeing you a much better performance. I'll be recording another video on this topic, talking a little bit about how I go about creating percussion setups. If there's anything you'd like to ask, put it in the comments and I'll put it in the future video. So those are my composing for percussion tips for today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Keep an eye out for the future videos.